like to call the regular school committee meeting to order. I'm Mayor Ted Betancourt, and today is May 11th, 2020, Monday, May 11th, and we are starting our meeting at 3:05. Per Governor Baker's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20, we are moving forward with remote school committee meetings. Members of the public can access the meeting via live stream. In addition, the events will be broadcast by our friends of Peabody Access TV, Peabody Channel 8 on Comcast, www.PeabodyTV.org, as well as their Facebook and YouTube accounts. The meeting notes are also being taken by our Peabody School Committee's recording secretary, Leanna Harris. And first, I just want to take the opportunity to wish everyone health and safety. These are certainly unprecedented times that we're working through, and we're doing the best we can to work together. We are having a number of meetings. We are trying to continue business as best we can and certainly these are not ideal situations, but it's important for us to keep moving forward and working together for our school district as best we can. This is not a regular meeting. Our next regular meeting is Tuesday, May 19th at 3 p.m. Today is a special school committee meeting. Our only item on the agenda is the Peabody Veterans Memorial High School graduation planning. And I think all of us agree that the class of 2020 has a special place in our hearts. It's been an amazing amount of tragedy and just sad circumstances that have really put our seniors, our whole school district, but in particular our seniors in just a real terrible position. And we want to do the best we can to make sure that we can provide them the respect, the recognition, the many accolades that they richly deserve. I just think the class has just distinguished themselves with in an amazing way, and a true testament to Tanner pride and Peabody pride, the way that they've handled just the amazing tragedy and everything that's been thrown at them. So I know all of us want to do the very best we can to provide them a graduation that they deserve, a prom, special events that we can provide for them. And I know we all want to do that. We might disagree a little bit during the course of this meeting on how we go about doing the graduation, but all of us want the very best. And I know we've had a number of members that have been a part of the Peabody Veterans Memorial High School Graduation Planning Committee that's been directed by Dr. Chris Lord. And we want to hear from them as to their thoughts, their recommendations. We have a number of people that have joined us from that planning committee. I want to thank them for their time that they put forward in those meetings. And we have our full school committee, as well as our administrative team is joining us. And why don't we get right to it? Dr. Lord, I wanted to turn it over to you. Do you want to open things up? I do think that those that are a part of the call, I have a screen that allows me to see who would like to speak. You can raise their hand. You can raise your hand. I think there's a button, and I certainly want to open up and get feedback from everybody during the course of this conversation. So, Dr. Lord, I want to see maybe if you could open things up and maybe introduce the members of the committee, and then we can go from there. Dr. Lord?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Betancourt. I'd like to echo the mayor's comments about the class of 2020. It's been an extraordinarily challenging year for everybody, and this class in particular, because there were some wonderful things planned over the last couple of months, for the coming couple of months, and we will do everything we can to celebrate as best we can under the current circumstances. Seniors were great coming into the high school today, getting the last of their belongings out of the school for the remainder of the school year. And we have got a pretty good plan in place for many of the activities that we need to get done, getting them their caps and gowns, for example, getting them their yearbooks, collecting their Chromebooks at the end of the year. Hopefully they can walk away with a really strong Q4 report card that'll illustrate the vision of the graduate for their future employers and future colleges, because there will be no high school generating a Q4 report card like this one. It'll be really good for the students to be able to have that walking away. About a month and a half ago, graduation committee started meeting about how to deal with graduation, and then we ran into the whole closure situation and brainstorming about how to deal with that from the get-go. I'd like to introduce Karen McGovern. Karen is the acting assistant principal. This has been one of the main charges of her care over the last several months. Ashlyn Fidalgo is one of our deans. She's been part of that conversation as well. And of course, we've had the class advisors for the senior class, Kristen Mercier, and I don't see Emily Clark. Is Emily? Yep, there she is. There's Emily over there. And of course, our class officers, Julia, Colleen, Jean Edward, and Lilia. They've been a great contribution to that. They've been the student voice through all of this. We've involved our resource officer, Manny Costa, and a number of other people in various parts of the conversation, and came up with a plan last week that illustrated their best thinking at the time. And we'd like to continue the conversation here and perhaps get to an even better place. There's some other ideas that might be available for us. I'd like to have Ms. McGovern fill in the blanks, anything I've missed here, but it's been a great conversation. I've been on the periphery somewhat, but the team's been meeting regularly to come up with the plan that they illustrated most recently.
Great, thank you, Dr. Lord. Karen, glad to have you, and thank you for your work and help during this year. It's been great to have you part of our school community again. Do you want to like to jump into things?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Betancourt and Dr. Lord. So with the closing of schools, we started talking about graduation, and we were receiving a lot of information on online, creating online graduations. And so we had an initial meeting to find out what kinds of services do we have within our school system. And we had Chris Mitchell and we had Jim Palmer to see, do we need to buy an online version of graduation if we would go that route? And as we started talking and the class offices were involved, they then went out and did some research, and most of the kids do not want a virtual graduation. That was a pretty clear message across the board that they did not want a virtual graduation in Peabody. So then the next step we were talking about was some grab and go, like a grab and go, you know, like a drive-through graduation. And as we continued to research and we looked at other districts, we looked at so many different models of graduation, because every district is really doing it differently. Some are taking the kids in with their parents one at a time, creating a stage, doing it over a week. Some people are putting it off for a year. We looked at every single option. And I want to say the class officers have been part of the graduation process, and they have learned at an early age what it truly means to be a leader when you have all of the information, and then the outside media, everybody's weighing in and saying, this is great, or this, why don't they care about us? I think the message is these class officers have advocated for their peers. They have represented the student's point of view, but they also recognize this common sense of some of the ideas that are out there. And graduation is a very emotional thing. People are giving their opinions based on emotion, and we've been looking at it logistically. So, you know, my initial conversation with Sharon Cameron, we talked about, you know, really the drive-by one. But as we were getting in and looking at all our options, kids want something more personal. They want that feeling of walking across the stage. And then as we started talking, Jim Palmer came up last week, and we were kind of looking at ideas and locations, and Officer Costa was with us to get it from a, you know, like a safety and political. And then, so we generated the proposal that came out last week, and it was a draft because there's still a lot of dependent on. The most important piece is the health and safety of the students, the staff, and the families. And that would be the forefront of the guidance from like the public health director. And Sharon's been great in giving me some information, just even on collecting the books to make sure that everything's safe in the way that we do things. So this might have been a little aggressive. Our class advisors have been great, because some districts are struggling because they don't have their caps and gowns and they can't get them. Well, you know what? In Peabody, our caps and gowns are in the building and all accounted for. So we are ahead of the game right there, and that's a credit to the class advisors being on top of that. So that doesn't have to weigh into a decision of when or when we can't do graduation. It's still, that's what we're here for today, is to get some guidance. I know there's a strong contingent that feel like graduation should go later into the summer. And if that's what the committee decides, we'll work with it. But we felt like the kids wanted to know what was going to happen with graduation. So after our meeting last week, we came up with the plan, and this is a working document, and we're working on it today. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Great. Thank you, Ms. McGovern. That was terrific. Any other members of the committee that would like to speak before we open it up to the council? I want to make sure we gave the opportunity at this point, if there's anybody else that would like to weigh in before we open it up to the committee members, the school committee members. Okay. Any school committee members would like to weigh in at this point, ask questions? If you're waving your hand, I'm sorry, I might not be able to see you. Mr. Arnottis, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your hard work on this. I know this is certainly not an easy process to do. I know there's been so much effort put into this. I mean, you're planning something that you really never had to plan for here. The most unique graduation we probably ever had to have. Now, I think there's almost two questions here, the how and the when of all this. And I think when you figure out the when, that has a big impact on the how more than anything else. And I have always been concerned with all this, that if we do a graduation so soon and it's not a drive-by or something along those lines, that you could then just bring people together. I think we're seeing in other places, even small openings are having an effect. So for me, I do think it might be best to move this out if we can. I understand the concern about military families and kids who might be going elsewhere, and if we can solve that piece of the puzzle, I'd be more comfortable with it. But I think we need to balance that more than anything else, how we're going to do this and when we're going to do this. I think if we were to wait later into the summer, I think the how expands a little bit more. I think our options become a little bit more flexible. I think if we try to get this done in a matter of a few weeks in June, then I think it becomes a little bit more of a struggle and a little bit riskier more than anything else. So I think we need to strike that balance well. And I'm happy to be part of this conversation and look forward to hearing what everyone has to say today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Arnottis. Mr. Amico?
Thank you through the chair. And I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Arnottis, and thank you through the chair. I just wanted to thank everyone on the committee, the students, faculty, administration. As Mr. Arnottis said, this is very, very difficult. It's difficult to plan a graduation during normal times, never mind during the times that we've been around over the last 6 weeks or so. So I just want to thank you so much. And whatever we do, I feel as though the city of Peabody will do right by its graduates, and we'll do the best that we can, and we'll throw them the best graduation we can. And that's why, to be honest, I would like to move the graduation date as well, because I feel as though there are just so many reasons to move it to, say, late July or early August. One of them being the obvious reason, the pandemic that we're in right now. Secondly, I think having more time to plan. Anytime you can add more time to your plate to plan something, chances are you can get more people involved. And with the, hopefully flattening the curve and having more planning time, maybe we get more closer to a traditional graduation. The other thing that I was thinking about over the weekend was, it also gives restaurants, caterers, and other businesses around Peabody area to maybe get used to this new normal, and maybe they'll be more ready come late July, August to help with parties, help with events, because there'll be a lot of graduation parties going on. But I also made some phone calls over the weekend, and I spoke to some graduates, potential graduates themselves, and some parents, and the feedback that I was getting. Now, there's no way I could call 300 people, but the feeling I was getting, and then perusing social media, I felt as though a lot of people want this to be moved to late July and August. I did have a couple of questions for Dr. Lord, however, from the other meeting, because I believe this will help us out as well. And if I could, through the chair to Dr. Lord, there are other districts that have moved their graduation to late July, August. I believe Danvers might have been one of them, and I'm not sure if Beverly did. I know Revere has as well. I was wondering if you were able to contact any of those districts or principals in those districts to see what they're doing for students who may be entering the military and be asked to leave in June, or for students who are entering college and may have to be there for either athletics or an early orientation. I was wondering if you could just share with us if you were able to call them.
Well, what I did is I went first to our team to find out how this would impact our students. And our guidance counselors went through all of the graduation class, and there's only one student who will be flying back to her home country immediately after graduation. So there isn't a military impact if we were to move it forward. The other school systems are having the same kind of conversations we are. They're looking at their individual student bodies and see if it'll impact them. Many are doing this is our plan A, and if we do get to open up, it'll be a plan B, more traditional. But I went with our kids first, and we only have one child that'll be impacted by a later graduation date.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Lord. Yep. Go ahead, Mr. Amico. You still have the floor.
At this point, I'll yield, and I'll listen to a few other school committee members, and then we can move forward from here. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Amico. Any other members? Mrs. Carpenter, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you. I just want to thank the committee that's been working on this. I know how difficult it is, and I know that there's a lot of opinions out there. And for the seniors that are on this committee, I'm so sorry that you're going through this. You know, I do know some of you, and I know your families, and you've had a really, really difficult year. You definitely deserve this. You deserve to have a graduation, and I know that we're going to get you one. Coming to something that makes everyone happy is definitely going to be difficult. I do agree that pushing it off might give us bigger and better possibilities. You know, I would ask when I'm done with my statement and some questions here, if somebody from that planning committee could just say for the public exactly what, kind of like what the stepping off point is, kind of what your first plan is, and then maybe we can go from there. I've had a lot of people reach out to me and talk about the fact that the students want to be together. And I get that you all want to be together, and can we put you 6 feet apart? And I think we can do that. And I think the bigger obstacle comes when your families want to be there. And that's a lot more people involved in the mix. And I've heard from several people about, you know, space. You know, we have the shopping center, we have the mall that we could use a lot of space if we really want to keep everyone together. Is there a limit maybe on family, just 2, and then we can keep you all together? But maybe if we could just start off with what the initial plan is, and then branch off from there with the possibilities of a later date and the possibilities of some better pandemic news that later on in July might bring us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Dr. Lord, Mr. McGovern, would you like to you be able to give kind of a little overview of the committee's recommendation?
Yep, go ahead,
Definitely.
Karen.
I think moving it to a later date is definitely a possibility. I think that the message out there for a lot of kids is that if we move it to a later date, say August 1st, that they're going to be able to have a full graduation. And originally, when I talked to Mrs. Cameron, that still seemed to be very iffy, that the odds of doing it may not happen. But I think it definitely seems the general consensus is to move the date. So if we move the date, you know, I think the class offices would not be opposed to that. And then the format is really going to range as to what the public health director guides us to, as to what, how much it opens. I've talked to people in the community, medical people, and they, you know, they say there's no way that you're going to have a full traditional graduation until there's a vaccine. And that's, you know, people's opinions that are out there. I know from a logistical point of view, and I don't know if Officer Costa wants to weigh in this, to have 350 teenagers 6 feet apart following the rules would be a very difficult thing to enforce. And then you're putting the safety of the other students, faculty, and invited guests at risk. So we have some real concerns. Could you fit 350 kids on the football field? Yes, but that's not going to guarantee that they will follow the social distancing and the protocols to keep everybody safe. So in order to do that, I would want it, you know, we would have to have, you know, public health first, and then and the police department to say, yes, you know, they know the kids. Manny knows the kids at the high school. The deans, they know the students. You know, Mrs. Fidalgo can speak to that too, and the concerns as to whether they would be able to follow the rules. And to tell you the truth, 80% of the kids to me would follow the rules, but it's that 20% that would be really disruptive, and that what we would have concerns with. I think that answers everything.
If I could just, through the chair, Mr. Betancourt.
Yeah, please, Dr. Lord, go ahead.
So to answer your question, some of the details of the logistics of this, we've sent this out already, but just to clarify, the graduation practice, I'm going to say, is the activity of driving through the school parking lot in a zigzag fashion and coming up through the access road. The population is going to be practicing this first to drop off their textbooks the week after Memorial Day, and then the following week, the students will be picking up their caps and gowns and their yearbooks and dropping off their Chromebooks in the same way. So this will be kind of a graduation practice. So the initial conversations were around a grab and go activity where the same thing would happen for graduation. They would go up the access road, and right in the front of the school, we would decorate the front of the school and have a graduation right in front of the school there with a podium. And that could still happen. It might have to happen in August if that's the advice of the health professionals. But that was the grab and go idea. It evolved into the more detailed protocol that the team came up with a few days later. And Ms. McGovern, if you have that document in front of you, you could kind of take everybody through so they could understand the details of what this alternate to the grab and go diploma looked like.
Yes, I do. If that's okay.
Yes, please, Ms. McGovern, go ahead.
And I think in our conversations with the committee and the students, you know, they want a connection with each other. They want as many of their peers present as possible. So when we kept talking about it, we said, well, maybe we could break it up. And if things are releasing in the state and we can have a group of 100, then maybe we could do 4 groups and we could break them up into like 80 or 90 kids each. So we talked about that. And if it loosened up, then we could make those groups larger. So if you know, if it comes to that, you can have a group of 200 together, then you could do 200 and 150. I mean, we would have those options, but you would still bring them out on the field. So they would line up in the faculty parking lot. We can choose how we group the students. Like we would have options. We wouldn't have to do it just alphabetically. Like we would want the top 20 to stay together. You know, we might want certain groups to do together. So we could work on those ideas. We could set a stage up at the end of the field. And then students could line up with their parents and then come into the field, hear their name, receive their diploma, and then walk around the track and go out by the D house. And this way they would at least hear the names of the peers in their groups also called, so that it kind of satisfied some of the requests of students that wanted to be together, that they wanted to be with their peers. If we couldn't do a full graduation like that. And then if we just, you know, depending on if we're going to put it out to like August, seeing what the numbers were, you know, we have a lot of possibilities. So that was pretty much it, because then we figured we could include the staff, we could put the ROTC program in there. as we kept talking about it, we kept adding ideas. We could have pictures of all the graduates along the fence, so it's like they're all part of the audience there. We talked about displaying the senior student artwork. Like, there's so many details that could go into it. We wanted to make it as traditional and as inclusive as we could within safety guidelines.
Great. Thank you, Ms. McGovern. Mr. Hockman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the graduating committee coming together and joining us this afternoon. I'd really like to hear from Colleen and Julie and Lila and John Edward. What do you guys want?
I think that most of the students collectively can agree that we want a graduation with everyone together. I know that might be hard, but I know that's what most students want.
Great, thank you. Any other students that would like to speak?
Realistically, I think we just have to follow all the guidelines so everyone stays safe. But obviously, we all want a graduation as normal as possible.
Okay. Thanks, Colleen. Any other comments?
I agree with what Ms. McGovern said about how we have to look at this logistically. Obviously, all those teenagers won't be able to stay within social distancing guidelines on the football field if we were to do it all together. But all of the class pretty much all wants it to be done all together, if possibly if we move the date back. So that is what the consensus is.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to you guys for your thoughts. Sharon, Ms. Cameron, based upon what we know right now on May 11th, do you envision having a graduation with 1,200 people at the high school football field anytime this summer?
First of all, I want to thank the committee for looping me in, and we at the health department really share everybody's goal to celebrate the achievements of this class. And obviously our role is to help give the guidance to make that a safe event. So thank you for that. You know, as we stand right now, there's both a stay-at-home advisory in effect, and there is a prohibition on mass gatherings of more than 10 people. There are a little bit of leeway for people who are outdoors in a space that's not enclosed. But when I think about the way that they phased in these restrictions, you know, first they were giving us guidance to limit gatherings to 100 people, and then they reduced it to 25, and then they reduced it to 10. As they start to relax guidance, I think we will see the same sort of tiered approach. So I think we will see possibly and hopefully after May 18th that the restriction on groups of gatherings of 10 will be lifted. Maybe it'll be lifted to 50. Maybe it'll be higher than that. I think it's very unlikely that we would see it lifted to a gathering in the thousands. I, you know, would like to. First of all, I'm not speaking with any certainty on that, but having seen the data, and we are starting to see improvements. But we're also understanding that as we relax some of the restrictions in the community, as people go back to work and go back out into public spaces, we are also expecting to see somewhat of a little bit of a bounce in the number of cases in terms of people having opportunities to infect more people. So we expect that our contact tracing initiatives will expand, and we may actually see an increase in the number of cases in the community. So unfortunately, you know, I don't have the certainty to say what the relaxed guidelines will look like, but I would be very surprised if we would be able to have a gathering of thousands of people this summer.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Cameron. If we knew, we wouldn't be in this predicament. So that's part of the quandary. But I suspect that you're right, that at least we're not going to get governmental approval of having a traditional graduation, even if we move it to August. You know, traditional, what I mean by that is, you know, each of the graduating seniors, a full band, full ROTC, full faculty, and even if it were a minimum of 2 family members per graduate. I don't see that happening before you guys start college or your careers or whatever the next phase of your life is. High school graduation is an important event. It's a significant event. It's a milestone event. It's a rite of passage. For some of your class, it's going to be the last graduation that they attend. And I'd like to see it happen before you guys all, spread out through that next phase and chapters of your lives. From what I'm hearing from students, not from parents, not from, social media, but from students, is that you guys all want to be together one last time. And that you want an event at the high school. You don't want a drive-by event. You don't want a virtual event. You want the senior class to gather in one location at one time and for it to be live. Last Tuesday, we had a school committee meeting and we continued this conversation. And I thank the mayor and a whole bunch of other people for putting the graduation committee together with us today to talk about it. But I think that we can accomplish getting the senior class together. I mean, I understand Ms. McGovern's concerns and maybe Mr. Costa's concerns, Officer Costa, about whether or not seniors in high school are going to listen to remaining 6 feet apart. There's enough space on the campus of the high school to put seniors 15 feet apart. We have a very, very small graduating class. We can keep people 20 feet apart. There's concerns about some students not adhering to a 6 foot minimum. And we can zigzag through an awful lot of parking lots, stop vehicular traffic up on the high school campus, and get this class walking around parking lots, unfortunately, but and then onto the track around the football field to pick up their diplomas in all together, the entire class together. Now, this is going to mean, in the way I see it at least, that family members won't be present. But to me, that sounded like the third or fourth most important thing to the people that I've talked to. It's important. You all want to be with your families. We all want to be with our families. But based upon safety measures, Ms. Dunn mentioned the whole senior class can have masks with the Tanner Bowl, on it. And, class of 2020 pandemic graduation masks. It could be a keepsake for you guys for the rest of your lives, a memento, if you will. But I think we can keep the current graduation date and socially distant, pre-record maybe some, maybe Jimmy Palmer and his crew. I'm sure there's footage of years past with the band that we could take and broadcast. I'm sure we could pre-record speeches from the valedictorian, the salutatorian, the class essayist, Mayor Betancourt, and others who would normally speak at the graduation, and have them running in some sort of loop. We can also video all of this for parents can watch it. We can broadcast live just like we're doing now, I think, through PATV. We have that capability. We can set up some locations for people that don't get PATV, either because they're on a platform other than Comcast, or they don't have Wi-Fi or cable to begin with. And we can do that perhaps with the partnership of the mall in the parking lot and broadcasting on a building, or the baseball field I talked about, the upper fields. There's a whole host of Kennedy Field, perhaps. I mean, there's a whole host of places where we can consider broadcasting for folks that don't have the ability to receive transmission in their houses or in some other place. We can create CDs of the event and give them to each senior so that they can have a CD available for their family members who don't live in Peabody or don't have access to our cable platform or the ability to get to any of these remote locations. I think, at least satisfying from what I'm hearing from seniors, their two highest priorities for this is to all be together and to have a live event. I don't think there's much difference between June 5th or August 1st. I don't think August 1st is going to accomplish getting 1,200 people at Coley Field. I don't think it's going to happen, although we all wish it would. I don't envision it. We're already talking about perhaps delays in the fall, the school year beginning in September. We're hearing from colleges that aren't opening up till January 1st. I can't envision, with restrictions that are in place now, and the way I think Ms. Cameron's described them is that when they're lifted, it's not just going to be a complete, vacating of these restrictions. It's going to be a slow rollback, I think. So those are my 2 cents. Appreciate everybody listening.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Mr. Olympio? John, are you muted?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the committee for all your hard work. And certainly my heart goes out to all of the students. This is an extremely tough time. And again, my heart goes out to all the students. But, based on what I'm hearing, it sounds like that our hands are tied right now. I mean, in the perfect world, even if we wanted to adhere to the social distancing rules of 6 feet apart and with the mask, it sounds like to me, though, we couldn't have more than 25 or even 100 students gathered in the same place at the same time, whether it was on the field or anywhere else. Is that true right now, as of now? Could maybe Ms. Cameron answer that question?
Mrs. Cameron, Ms.
Well,
Cameron.
Sure. Right now, the governor's advisory says that there should not be any gatherings of more than 10 people. There are some allowances when you're not outside in an enclosed space, but it's still not recommended to bring more than 10 people together for any gathering.
Okay. So, right there, I agree with what Mr. Hockman is saying, but it just seems like to me our hands are going to be extremely tied for June 5th. And by maybe pushing it out past into July, maybe we'll have more flexibility with what we can do. But I don't know how we can get around a mass gathering on June 5th. That's how I feel.
Thank you, Mr. Olympio. Any other committee members? Mrs. Dunn, are you waving?
Yes, I waved in person and I waved on the little button there.
Oh, I didn't see you on the button, but
Yeah.
I always like when you wave to me. Can you go ahead? I'll open it up to you.
Well, to be honest, Mr. Hockman's suggestion about putting the speeches on a loop really threw me for a loop, because hearing you once is going to be enough on graduation day, Mr. Mayor. You make good speeches, but once is enough. Just kidding. Really, thank you all for being together with us, all of you on the graduation committee. I know every year before graduation, you folks meet in one shape or form or another to plan graduation, and all your work goes on behind the scenes. And it has for many years. And lucky you, this year, all of your work is really, it's being discussed and actually being recognized, which is kind of nice, because it has gone on unrecognized for all these years, and it is a lot of work. I know you never expected this amount of work when you signed up and volunteered back in September, but the work you're doing is really very, very detailed. We can see how you've looked at so many different aspects of this problem. And it's really unfortunate. I know that one of my greatest hopes is to be able to give the graduates a graduation as close as possible to what you anticipated. And I would still hope to do that. I realize that the date may have to change. I don't think that the date is going to be critical at the moment, but we don't know whether things would open up a bit in August or if, from what we read, they're anticipating a second wave, and I don't know when that's going to hit. My consideration when I was recommending, June 5th was based on the fact that I didn't think anything would change drastically between now and August 1st. And I was concerned that if we wait till August 1st and can't have anything, we would have basically run out of time to have a ceremony for you, because even if we did, I don't know, in November or some other time, it's just not the same. Once you are done with school, we know, we remember, you've checked out. You checked out a few weeks ago, but hang in there. You've still got exams. Don't give up so quick. But we know what it's like. And that's been the big difficulty. I'll be honest, I am still hopeful for a Doug Flutie Hail Mary pass somewhere along the line to be able to do something so you can all be together. Something that would be, a really great graduation for you. But I do know, having heard this discussion, that everything being planned is still trying to make it special for you, even if it's not going to be the same that everyone has always had. Yours will be unique. It already is unique. Your class is unique for good and bad reasons. And I'm glad to hear this discussion, and I thank you all, because you have looked at a lot of different information, and we still do have time. I think, being able to keep looking at your options. You've got your plan A, you've got your plan B, but making sure that you have that opportunity to be together as much as possible, and have that chance to graduate together. That is the ultimate goal for me. And I thank you all very much. I am heartened to learn through this discussion that only one student at the moment would be affected. We move graduation to August 1st. That made me feel a bit better. And I just want you all to know that we're going to still continue to work with you all as much as possible to make some of your dreams come true.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. I think everybody's been heard, and I just wanted to say a few words on this. I, like all of you, have given this a great deal of thought, and I'm very appreciative of all the work that's gone into this. My feeling is just that, from what I've heard from people, is that they want, and it's been said a few times, as traditional a graduation ceremony as possible. And without question, that can't be done on June 5th. And I want to see if we can give the students the opportunity to have that in the future. And I think time would be on our side if we push this back till July or even August 1st, that maybe things loosen up here a little bit. The governor today, just a short time ago, announced the 4-phase approach to reopening Massachusetts businesses. And there's a lot of information in there. I know more information is going to be coming from our healthcare professionals and from our elected officials that maybe can help us in the future here, and maybe have more of a traditional setting and allow our graduates to be together, to be with their families, their friends, and everybody in the community to celebrate what they've accomplished. So I believe that we should push this off. If come August 1st, or we get closer to that time and we're still in the situation we are now, then we can look to do this plan, which I think has a lot of positives to it. But I want to give the seniors the opportunity to have something special that they deserve. Have the speakers give their speeches live, be together again with your families, and try to enjoy it as best they can all together. So my feeling is to push this back, allow for time to develop, allow for more information to come forward, and we could put something together, hopefully, that would make it a real special day for everybody. And again, if not, then we go to this plan, which has been very well thought out and could work as well. So my feeling is time would be on our side, push it off, and then see where we go from there. All right. Dr. Kerbel, I don't know if you wanted to weigh in on this before we go back to some counselors. Dr. Lord, I didn't know if either of you wanted to weigh in. All right, I'd open it up.
Thank you,
Okay,
Mayor Ben
go ahead,
Court.
Dr. Kerbal.
I muted myself. I forgot. I want to thank all the students and the advisors. So I've listened intently, and so I understand the issue about time and that could play in your behalf. The other thing is you come together as a committee. I'm talking about the students and teachers and administrators. And so sometimes I think that sometimes the committee makes a decision. And so, you know, the mayor and the school committee had told, I'm talking to the students now, had told the committee that you should wait until July or August. But meanwhile, I would keep all of your dreams alive in terms of your planning. And then don't give up on your plans. I think your plans are great. And that's what a committee does. Okay, so you heard from the school committee, and you have to weigh out your options. But I think that as a committee, you came together, and I think you should keep working together. And that in the end, the committee will decide, and you'll do a great job for your fellow students. And so, and I know you do a great job. Okay, so thanks, Mayor Ben Court, for allowing me to say a few words.
Great, thank you, Dr. Kerbal. Mr. Amico? I think you have your hand up, Mr. Amico.
Thank you, through the chair. And again, I just want to thank everyone for all the hard work. And thank you to everyone who's weighed in. The one word that I think we're all looking for here is hope. And we don't know what the future is going to bring June 5th, July 15th, August 1st, but we have to hope. And if that's the message that we can give our potential graduates, that there is hope that we can have a traditional graduation, then I think we owe it to them. They're not having one on June 5th. They may have one on August 1st or July 31st, but we're not even sure of that. That's a long shot, as Ms. Cameron said. But with that said, I think the great work that this committee has done, the graduation committee has done, I still don't think you're ready for the next. I think there's still a lot more work to be done, a lot more time needed. And with that, I'm going to make a motion to move the date of graduation to August 1st.
Okay, you've heard the motion from Mr. Amico. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Arnottis. Any comments before we vote? All right.
Just on the motion.
Yeah, please, Mrs. Dunn.
I would like to ask if we could have a recommendation from the graduation committee on that date, if they are agreeable to that date. The reason being, the school committee does not have the authority to set the graduation date. So I just like to have a recommendation from that group, if that works for them.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Mr. Hockman?
Barb, did anyone want to respond to Ms. Dunn's question before I speak? Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Hockman.
Joe, Mr. Miko, did you want to say something?
Sure, through the chair, and thank you for bringing that up, Ms. Dunn. And with that said, I think we have well over 300 graduates that probably could be heard as well. And not to take anything away from the 3 or 4 seniors who are on this committee, but if we're going to take student data and get real data, then maybe we look at the 300 students and see what they think and their parents, because as much as we've heard, people wanting to keep it on June 5th, not one person has reached out to me over the last 5 days to say they wanted to keep June 5th. And actually, it's been totally opposite. Everyone that I've talked to has said late July, August 1st. So if we're going to get data, then maybe we should look at data from a larger source, a larger group. And in education, having data from a larger group is always better than maybe 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. And again, that's nothing to take away from these students. They're fantastic. They've done a great job. But I've also heard from other students who want to move graduation, from other parents. So maybe we survey them as well.
Mayor
Mr. Hockman?
Bettencourt, can I jump in?
Oh, yeah, please, Mr. McGovern, go ahead.
I think our class officers are doing an awesome job, and they're a great representation of their class. And I don't want them to at all feel that that they're just representing a small group. But I will say, I think they're also shy. So I'm going to ask you, if you are not opposed to the August 1st date, can you just shake your head? You're okay with August 1st? So I don't think that they have any problem with moving the graduation date. I kind of kept silent because I was hoping one of you would kind of speak up, but I think that they will be very fine. We've gone back and forth on what the date was as a graduation committee, and I'm sure they are okay with it. And the only other thing I want to add is, Mr. Hockman, we will have a full video of the graduation with all the speeches at the end for all the students. And Jim Palmer, we've talked about those details already. So that's my 2 cents.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Mr. Hockman, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Thank you, Mr. Amico, and to everyone else. Just to Mr. Amico's point, I've heard from quite a few people, students who want to keep June 5th. I've heard from quite a few students that are okay moving back into later into the summer. So that, I think it's a mix among the students themselves. But on the motion, Joe, you made a motion to move graduation to August 1. Is there any talk about having convocation the night before and an academic awards ceremony as well? Because that's all a big part of, the senior experience, and maybe that's for another meeting at a different time. But I don't know. Historically, convocation is the evening before graduation, and it's incredibly happy and joyful event, as is graduation. So just wondering if that's in your vision here.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hockman. My feeling is, before I go to the other councils, that's probably something we could hold off on it and discuss at a later time. It's a great event, kind of sets the state graduation. And again, I think that's an event that families like to come to and be a part of. And, certainly the students want to be together for that evening as well. So I would think that time, again, would be on our side. Let's see how things shake out as more information comes, and hold off on that as well. Mr. Amico, I'll give you the opportunity. I know there's other people that wanted to speak, but the question was directed at you.
In regards, excuse me, was that through the chair, Mr. Hockman, was that in regards to convocation?
Yes.
Absolutely, and I would yield to our administration on that, to set it up for either that Thursday or Friday. I believe July 31st is a religious holiday for our Muslim students, so possibly look into that the night before that Thursday. But absolutely, we should have a convocation. That's an incredible night that all of us attend, and it's students should be honored at that time, and we should keep it.
Yeah, if I can, Mr. Mayor, just briefly.
Yeah, you still have the floor.
Yeah, even though, I advocated for June 5th graduation here today, I'm more inclined to agree to move the motion, so long as we keep in mind and also consider convocation and academic awards and a few other important ceremonies that take place, like George Peabody medals and things like that. So I'm glad that we can talk about it at a future date, Mr. Mayor, and thanks again to everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question for Dr. Lord or Ms. McGovern. I'm wondering, was the senior class polled at all by email? I know we have that capability. Did any of this go out to the seniors for any type of responses?
One of the officers like to answer that. Oh, go ahead, Johnny. Yep.
A portion of the senior class that follows our Instagram was polled, and the majority of them wanted it be either moved or not be done through a grab and go or virtually.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's good too. I just want to make sure that the kids, that their voices are being heard, and I know it's the class officers that you speak for your classmates, but I also want to make sure that they've had the opportunity to to speak to what their opinion is on this.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Mrs. Carpenter, did you have a comment?
Yes. So I believe there's a motion that was made. I got bumped out a minute ago, and then I heard the end of maybe Mr. Amico making a motion. So I just wanted to get clarification on that. And this is a perfect example of why the virtual graduation would really stink. Can you imagine getting bumped out of your virtual graduation? But anyway, Mr. Amico, did you make a motion?
I did, and Ms. Carpenter, I did not make a motion to bump you out of the Zoom meeting, I swear.
I just did that on my own. I just did that on my own. She was talking too much.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. The motion was made to move graduation to August 1st. And then Mr. Hockman had asked about convocation and other important ceremonies. And I said I would yield on those to our administration to set up those great events so that our students our graduating seniors can definitely have those events as well. But my only motion that I made was to move graduation to August 1st.
So with that, I remember when we moved graduation from a Saturday to a Friday night, one of them was so that families would have more time to be together on the next day. Another one is weather, and I'm just wondering why we wouldn't do it on July 31st, which would be a Friday night, given the fact that it's probably really going to be hot now. We're in July, where it might be more towards an evening event. I'm hoping, we're all outside. But is there any reason we wouldn't? And then even you could consider rain, then you would still have August 1st. Any reason why you picked the 1st instead of the 31st?
Through the chair, Ms. Carpenter.
Yeah, please, Mr. Miko, you go ahead.
Sure. Through the chair, Ms. Carpenter, the only reason why I picked August 1st instead of July 31st, when I just went into my calendar and I clicked on July 31st, I noticed that it is a Muslim holiday, and to be respectful for our Muslim students, I just figured we could have it on August 1st. Where it's a Saturday as well, maybe that gives us the full day to have multiple ceremonies if we had to, or Plan Bs or Plan Cs. So that's why I chose that. But if it's the will of the committee to move to July 31st, I would want some recommendation on that as well.
No. I like your explanation. You would have like the full day in case you have to really spread the students out, if they can't all be together.
And for the chair, to Ms. Carpenter, as for a rain date, obviously, if it did rain on August 1st, there's no way we could have, well, I can't say this for a fact, but I'm sure public health would not want us to be inside the gymnasium or the auditorium or inside. So we would have to have rain dates probably scheduled for that Sunday or Monday, maybe not on Sunday where it's a Sunday, but certainly maybe that Monday, Tuesday. But that's something that we can figure out logistically.
Yeah, no, those dates sound good. Thank you, Mr. Amico.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. So we have a motion on the floor that was made by Mr. Amico, seconded by Mr. Arnottis. Any final comments before we vote? Roll call vote, please. Ms. Saris?
Mr. Amico?
Yes.
Mr. Arnottis?
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Hockman?
Yes.
Mr. Olympio?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate everyone's hard work. I think hope was the right word that was used, and really hoping that this works out. Our seniors deserve it. Our schools deserve it. And as we wrap up, please, everybody stay safe, and we will get through this together. Our next meeting is next Tuesday, May 19th at 3 p.m. Thank you, everyone, and we'll call the meeting to a close. Thank you.
Thank you.